It was an ordinary Friday night, and the house was completely empty aside from me and my boyfriend, Ryan. My dad had left for a business trip, and my stepmom, Melissa, was supposed to be away for the entire weekend. This meant we had the whole place to ourselves, and I was eager to spend some uninterrupted time with Ryan. We had been together for a while, and every moment we shared still felt fresh and exciting. It was one of those rare occasions where we could relax around each other without the fear of being interrupted. The two of us had settled down on the couch to watch a movie. Before long, though, we grew more comfortable, snuggling closer together as our hands began to wander. The movie soon became little more than background noise as our attention turned completely to one another. There was a certain exhilaration in knowing we were alone in the house, and neither of us could resist the temptation. Things quickly became more intense, and soon we were completely immersed in the moment, kissing deeply and feeling the electricity between us. Ryan's hands explored my body, and my heart raced with the thrill of our privacy. The mix of excitement and the slightly risky situation only heightened the intensity of everything. But then, without any warning, the front door suddenly swung open. My heart dropped as we quickly separated, but it was already too late. Standing in the doorway was Melissa, my stepmom, staring directly at us. Panic coursed through me as I tried to process what was happening. She wasn't supposed to be back yet. What was she doing here so early? For a brief moment, everything seemed frozen in place. Melissa's expression was unreadable as her eyes scanned the scene, taking in our disheveled state and the couch where we'd been caught in the act. I braced myself for an outburst, for her to yell, scold me, or deliver a lecture about respect and boundaries, but none of that happened. Instead, she quietly shut the door behind her and stepped further into the room. My breath caught in my throat. What was she going to do? To my absolute astonishment, Melissa didn't look angry at all. If anything, her expression was one of curiosity, almost as though she found the situation amusing. She calmly sat down in a chair across from us, her gaze never leaving mine. The air in the room felt thick with tension, and I was at a complete loss for words. My face burned with embarrassment, but Melissa's calm demeanor was completely throwing me off balance. "Looks like you two were enjoying yourselves," she said casually, her tone steady and unexpected. Ryan and I exchanged a glance, both too stunned to respond. I opened my mouth to apologize, but the words wouldn't come out. Melissa leaned back in her chair, crossing her legs, her eyes still locked on mine. "Don't worry," she continued, in a voice that sounded almost playful. "I'm not upset. In fact, I'm a little impressed." Her words left me completely stunned. Impressed? What did she mean by that? My face flushed even deeper as I struggled to figure out how to reply. Ryan shifted uncomfortably next to me, clearly just as baffled as I was. Melissa's eyes moved between Ryan and me, her expression unreadable. There was something about the way she looked at us. Part curiosity, part something I couldn't quite identify. It made me uneasy, but at the same time there was a strange, inexplicable thrill to it. Melissa had always been somewhat enigmatic to me. There was something different about her in that moment, something that sent my pulse racing in a way I couldn't fully understand. "I know what it's like to be young," Melissa said, her voice smooth and almost teasing. "You get swept up in the moment, don't you?" She smiled at me, and a shiver ran down my spine. There was something disconcerting about her gaze, yet I couldn't bring myself to look away. "Relax," she added, noticing how stiffly Ryan and I were sitting. "I'm not here to judge. In fact," she paused, her smile growing slightly wider, "I remember exactly what it was like to be in your position." Her words lingered in the air, heavy with an unspoken implication that made my mind spin. Was she suggesting what I thought she was? The idea seemed absurd, yet the look on her face hinted at something far beyond mere understanding. Before I could fully comprehend what was happening, Melissa stood up and walked toward the couch where Ryan and I were sitting. There was a certain grace in the way she moved, something I hadn't noticed before. Suddenly, she was standing right in front of us, looking down at me with a knowing smile. I felt Ryan stiffen beside me, and I couldn't tell if it was from confusion or because he was beginning to sense the same strange energy I was. "I'll tell you what," Melissa said softly, leaning in closer. "Why don't we keep this between us? No one needs to know what happened here today." My throat tightened as I swallowed hard, my heart hammering in my chest. Was she serious? Was she really suggesting that we just pretend none of this had happened? The idea of keeping such a secret was both nerve-wracking and oddly thrilling. But what choice did we have? It wasn't as if we could tell anyone about what had just occurred. Melissa's voice dropped to a whisper as she leaned even closer, her words sending a shock through me. And maybe, she added with a sly smile, I could join you too. My breath hitched, and I stared at her in disbelief. She couldn't mean that, could she? But the look on her face left no room for doubt. This wasn't a joke or some kind of strange misunderstanding. Melissa was genuinely suggesting that she wanted to be part of this. I turned to look at Ryan, but he seemed just as stunned as I was. Neither of us could find any words to say, and the room felt unbearably small, the air thick with tension. Then, before I could even begin to comprehend what was unfolding, Melissa stepped closer to Ryan, her hand reaching out gently to touch his shoulder. My heart pounded as I watched her, completely unsure of how to respond. Ryan glanced at me, his wide eyes filled with confusion. But there was another emotion there too. Something that made my stomach twist uncomfortably. Everything was happening so quickly, and I didn't know how to stop it, or if I even wanted to stop it. Melissa's hand slid slowly down Ryan's arm, and I noticed how his breath hitched in his throat. She was so close now, and the atmosphere in the room was charged with a kind of energy I couldn't quite explain. It felt almost dreamlike, as though I was watching the events unfold in slow motion, unable to intervene, and uncertain if I even wanted to. Before I could gather my thoughts, Melissa leaned in closer, her lips brushing against Ryan's ear as she whispered something I couldn't hear. Whatever she said made Ryan's eyes widen, and I could feel the tension in the room building to an unbearable peak. I had no idea what was going to happen next, but I knew everything had shifted in that moment. Nothing would ever be the same. The room seemed to spin around me as I struggled to process what was happening. Melissa's hand lingered on Ryan's arm, and the heat radiating off her body was palpable as she leaned even closer to him. I knew I should have stopped her, said something, anything to break the suffocating tension in the room, but I couldn't. Instead, I just sat there, frozen in place as though my body no longer obeyed me. Ryan's eyes met mine, his expression a mix of shock and something else I couldn't quite identify. There was a flicker of excitement in his gaze that sent a strange, twisting sensation through my stomach. He was just as bewildered as I was, but I could tell a part of him was intrigued, drawn to this unexpected situation. Melissa stepped back slightly, though her hand remained resting on Ryan's arm, her calm smile making it seem as though everything about this moment was perfectly ordinary. The silence in the room was broken only by the sound of our breathing, the tension so thick it felt almost tangible. I can see you two are surprised, she said softly, her tone smooth and steady. But there's no need to be nervous. We're all adults here, aren't we? Her gaze shifted between Ryan and me, her eyes lingering on me in a way that made my skin tingle with both unease and curiosity. Ryan shifted awkwardly beside me, silently pleading for some sort of direction, but I had none to give. My mind was racing, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst. I knew I should have spoken up, should have done something to put an end to this. But the thrill of the situation clouded my judgment. Melissa must have sensed our hesitation, because she moved even closer, her hand trailing down Ryan's arm until it came to rest lightly on his leg. I saw the way his muscles tensed under her touch, and a shiver ran down my spine. She wasn't teasing anymore. She was serious. What do you say? Melissa asked in a low, sultry voice. There's no need to be shy. We're just having a little fun, right? Her smile grew slightly wider, and I felt the tension in the room become almost unbearable. I swallowed hard, my mouth dry, as I struggled to think of anything to say, but my mind was a chaotic mess of emotions I couldn't process. Part of me wanted to scream at her to stop, to leave, to put an end to this before it went any further. But another part of me, one I didn't fully understand, was curious, tempted by the thrill of the unknown. Ryan was still watching me, waiting for me to make a decision, clearly as conflicted as I was. Yet there was something in his expression, a glimmer of intrigue that mirrored the feelings I didn't want to admit were stirring within me. Melissa's hand moved slightly, her fingers brushing against Ryan's leg in a way that made my breath catch. She was testing the boundaries, pushing to see how far we'd let this go, and I wasn't sure how much longer I could hold back. My heart was racing, my thoughts tangled, and I felt trapped in a moment that I couldn't escape. Then, before I could say anything, Melissa stood up. Her smile didn't waver as she took a deliberate step back from the couch, her movement slow and calculated, as if she was giving us time to absorb everything that had just happened. Take your time to think about it, she said, her tone gentle yet carrying an undeniable confidence. There's no rush. Just know that I'm here if you decide you want me to join. Her eyes lingered on both of us for a moment longer before she turned and ascended the stairs, leaving Ryan and me alone in the living room. The silence she left behind was overwhelming, almost deafening. As soon as she disappeared from sight, I exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. My mind was racing, my heart pounding erratically in my chest. I glanced at Ryan, and he looked back at me, his eyes wide with confusion, but also with something else. Something I recognized because I felt it too. It was the thrill of the moment, the strange, electric excitement of finding ourselves in such an unexpected situation. Neither of us spoke for what felt like an eternity. The quiet between us was heavy, weighted with the enormity of everything that had just happened. I could see the uncertainty in Ryan's expression. It mirrored the doubt I was feeling, but there was also a spark of curiosity, a pull of temptation that neither of us could fully ignore. What just happened? Ryan finally broke the silence, his voice barely audible. His question hung in the air, unanswered, because I didn't know how to respond. I didn't understand what had just unfolded or what it meant for us. All I knew was that nothing would ever be the same after this. I don't know, I admitted shakily, my voice unsteady. I don't know. We stayed there for what seemed like hours, the tension between us remaining thick as the reality of what had occurred began to sink in. I couldn't wrap my head around the fact that Melissa had walked in on us, had seen everything, and then offered to be a part of it. It felt surreal, like something out of a dream, something too bizarre to be true. But it was real. It had happened. And now, we were left to figure out what to do next. Ryan shifted slightly beside me, his hand reaching over to gently take mine. His fingers were warm, and I could feel the faint tremor in his touch, a clear sign that he was just as shaken as I was. I looked at him, and for a long moment we simply stared at each other, the weight of the decision pressing down on both of us. I don't know what to do, Ryan finally confessed quietly, his voice tinged with hesitation. I didn't know what to do either. The lingering thrill of the situation pulsed through me, but it was accompanied by a deep sense of confusion, a feeling of being untethered, unsure of where the boundaries were anymore. We had crossed into completely uncharted territory, and I had no idea how to navigate it. Before we could say another word, the sound of footsteps echoed from the staircase. Melissa was coming back down. My heart immediately began racing again, my thoughts still a chaotic mess as I tried to prepare myself for whatever was about to happen. She appeared at the bottom of the stairs, her expression calm and composed. Her movements were measured, deliberate, as she approached us once again. This time, there was no hesitation in her demeanor. She knew exactly what she wanted, and it was clear she wasn't going to wait for us to take the lead. So, she said, her voice soft but carrying a quiet confidence, have you made a decision? I swallowed hard, my thoughts still spinning uncontrollably. I didn't know how to answer her. Everything was happening so quickly, and I couldn't focus enough to think clearly. All I could sense was the charged energy between us, the air thick with tension that couldn't be ignored. Ryan turned to look at me, his face a mixture of doubt and something else, something that echoed the feelings swirling inside me. I saw it in his eyes, the same thrill, the same pull of temptation that was drawing us both toward the unknown. We were standing at the edge of something that had the potential to change everything, and in that instant, I realized that whatever happened next, there would be no way to undo it.